So our next resource is the Nice White Parents podcast. Professor Marine, could you share a little bit about what this resource is?
Sure. So I stumbled upon this because I'm a big fan of podcasts. Maybe some of you are too. I find them to be the best possible background noise for walking, moving, cleaning, everything I need to do physical. I stumbled upon this. Actually, several people said to me, you really need to listen to this. And I'm so glad I did. The Nice White Parents podcast is a 5-part series that is on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on Serial. And it was done by a really, really wonderfully talented and thoughtful journalist named Hannah Jaffe Walt. And what Hannah does in this series is she walks us through her experience as a parent in New York, a white parent, thinking about and going through the process of seeking out the right school for her kids in Brooklyn. And in the process of doing that, she began to learn about a middle school in Brooklyn that was predominantly Black and Latinx for most of its existence. And then a group of white parents who moved into this area of Brooklyn where the school is located decided to kind of send their kids to this school. But in the process of doing that, kind of decided that the school needed to be really different. It needed to have all of these additional programs that it didn't have, and it needed to be a French immersion school, again, in a predominantly Black and Latinx neighborhood. And Hannah walks through the process of learning about how a group of kind of, we might say well-meaning, but not so well-intentioned white parents walked into this school system and changed it so that it would be the school that they wanted. And all of the layers of kind of class, racial, educational, institutional assumptions that came along with these parents really transforming this school. And one might say in many ways, they transformed it in ways that moved it toward being a quote unquote better school. And I think a critical read of the podcast and listening hard, we might wonder why this had to happen at all and why white parents needed the school to be radically different in order for them to feel that it was deserving for their children. And one of the things that I teach about in my classes, because I'm very aware how little we're taught in this country about school systems and about school funding, is that our school systems in this country are largely funded by property taxes. And that if we think that we don't have segregated school systems in this country, we are really mistaken. We have segregation lives on in virtually every school district in this country, whether urban, rural, or suburban. And we continue to promulgate practices in our educational systems that not only separate where kids go to school, but more importantly, separate the resources that are available to schools in different neighborhoods, in different communities. And that's purely about the living manifestation of white supremacy. Sometimes we think of white supremacy as this specter of evil people like affiliated with the Proud Boys and the behaviors that they might practice in our culture. And that's true. That's a big part of white supremacy. But an insidious part of white supremacy is I need to make a school really different so I feel like it's okay for my kids to go there. Not me, but white people. We do this over and over and over again. And so the podcast is a really excellent analysis of how does this happen? Why does this happen? And probably most importantly for everyone on this call tonight, what can we do about it? What can people who care about equity, justice, and inclusion everywhere in our society, but especially in our schools, how can we intervene in ways that benefit all students in meaningful ways, not equally, because equal is a facade, right? It's not real, but benefit schools in equitable ways so that lower resourced schools get access to better and more resources. And so that, frankly, so that white parents would stop interfering in perfectly functional schools and start to think and talk about how all school systems can be made better by a different kind of advocacy for better resources, for better supplies, for better teacher prep, for all children of all backgrounds. That's really the takeaway of the podcast is that's where we should be putting our energy. And as a person who studied education for 25 years, I learned so much from this podcast. I felt so energized around it, and I felt so clear on what needs to be different. And I felt transformed by it.
Awesome. Is there anything that you wish this this podcast had? And then I also see that Shannon raised her hand, and we can pop over to you, Professor McCord.
Yeah, the one thing the podcast does that I find a little problematic is I would say there's an overrepresentation of the kind of earnest white parent voice in this podcast. Here's all the reasons why I wanted the school to be different. And no, I wasn't trying to be racist, or, there's a lot of kind of apologetics of kind of, again, well-intentioned white folks and our behavior. And I would have loved to have more parents of the students of color, of the students living near the school, of the students for whom the school was a perfectly wonderful functional community before the French immersion parents got involved. I'd love to hear more of their voices, because I think we heard a lot of critique, but not a lot of their experience of that.
I just wanted to jump in and say this is a topic I could probably talk about all night, having two children. I wish I were as blessed as Kat, but I have two, one in college and one in elementary school. And one of the things that helped me understand the school funding issue that I don't know if our students who are in attendance really understand. And someone has to tell me the name of the book, because I can't remember. There's this old white guy who's an educational sociologist.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a documentary about his book. And what it shows is two schools in Cleveland, one that is in the shadows of the Cleveland Browns football stadium for you sports fans, and one that is still in Cleveland, but is kind of north of the stadium. So they're both funded by the same tax dollars, but in different socioeconomic neighborhoods. And in the documentary, like, if you're a visual learner, this is a resource that as soon as we figure out what the name of it is, that you should go look up, because it shows the kids in that one, Savage Inequalities. Thank you. Yes.
Jonathan Kozol. Sorry, Shannon. In the video, it shows the kids in the less well-resourced school, and it's winter and it's raining, and they have to put their coats on to go outside to use the bathroom. And there's a music class in the basement, but right above them, the basketball team is practicing, so they're bouncing the balls while the poor kid is in the hallway trying to play his tuba.
I spent a good deal of time.
And then you drive to the top of Cleveland, same city, and they've got this nice state-of-the-art track, and they've got whiteboards and all that. People are popping it into the chat. I mean, I like the podcast that you guys have watched, but if you want to like visually see what that disparity looks like, because I see that there's some education majors that are in attendance today, that will really give you, and it's a little dated, but it's good, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Shannon. Totally loved the book. It's great.
I am sharing that in the chat with all of the attendees. And then I just want to pop it over to Kat for some last words on this resource.
Sure, I could talk about the inequities in school all day, but I think nothing has really highlighted this more currently and recently than COVID-19. It really has highlighted, whether you want to see it or not, the inequities that exist in our public schools. And the thing that I wanted to just touch on is, by way of anti-racism and change in the schools, and just kind of offer one little glimmer of hope, because I feel like it could be very daunting. We do a lot of work in the schools, and there are many layers of what needs to be done. But something that I just want to encourage people who might have a position of power or ability to influence is setting an atmosphere to be able to hear parents and families. I have seen drastic differences with whom shows up to say what to school committee meeting members, and what parents can rally around getting a new school or upgrades at their school. And it's not by numbers, right? Because I've seen large groups of parents show up and try to advocate for their needs for their students. And I've unfortunately watched school committee members just completely shut down, groups of parents because they don't speak the language and there's no interpretation in school committee meetings, and things that could have very simple changes to be able to accommodate hearing from the family members as far as the needs of the students. And the other thing is curriculum. And so curriculum hands down perpetuates supremacy. That is a simple change. There's lots of great curriculum out there that could shift the way that narrative is kind of sung and sold to kids, because that is ingested. And it's one of the very sneaky ways in which we continue to perpetuate supremacy in our school district. So I just wanted to kind of offer those 2 points.